Okay.
Today, we are doing our first ever, hopefully the first of many. We hope this becomes a regular feature, listener Q&A. We can talk about boys and what we think you want to know all day long, but we decided to put it out to you and ask what you wanted to know, what your questions were, and we got some really interesting questions back.
Really interesting questions. I love the feedback, and it's interesting to see the themes that come from your Facebook group and your business page and my Facebook group and my business page, and how we're kind of all in the same loop here. And so I want to share the first one from Stephanie, and she says, "Hi, I listened to your podcast and just finishing." Oh my God. Stop. It's going to be that kind of day.
What? That wasn't food?
She says, "Hi, I listened to your podcast and just finished listening to the one with Amy Lang and had a question. I know she says we should begin talking to boys about bodies at age 5. I was wondering if this still applies to boys who are always using potty words and has a horrible filter. My son, unfortunately, goes to school and talks to his friends about poop and butts with no filter."
So the first thought that I have for Amy is not Amy. Oh.
Start again. The first thought. Stephanie. Oh my gosh. Stephanie. Okay. Ready?
So the first thought I have for Stephanie when I got this question, my first thought was, it is completely, totally, 100% normal for 5-year-old boys to talk about poop and butts and to take a lot of pleasure in it. And here's the other thing, as strange as this may sound to us moms and teachers, 5-year-old boys bond by doing this. It was in kindergarten when my son, they were drawing the giraffes in art class, and he drew a pile at the back end and labeled it poo. And he got in trouble with the art teacher because she didn't think that was appropriate. But he got a lot of social approval from his friends. Let me tell you, like, that kind of made him a hero in the kindergarten class.
Yeah. And this comes up a lot in my parenting talks, and moms are always like, "Oh, what is it about fart jokes and all of these things?" And the dads are just sitting next to them, shaking their heads. Yeah, it's funny. It's good stuff. So this is, all the way through up to adulthood.
I have to tell you, my husband and I were reading, we're getting old. We were flipping through his issue of AARP magazine, and we were reading this article about health, things. What's a big deal? What works? What doesn't work? What's a fad? And one of the things that works is fecal transplants. If you're not really into health, you might not want to know about this. But as a writer, and it goes with this, as a writer and as a mom of boys, there was the best quote ever in this article. And it was a quote from a doctor saying, "A lot of people have poo-pooed this idea over the years." That cracked me up. And part of it is because I have lived with these boys for long enough to realize it is funny. It is universally funny. Let it go. Don't be all uptight about it. There's the famous book, Everyone Poops, right? Get that from your library. And here's the thing. It's also an opportunity to provide our boys with guidance as to what is appropriate in what situations.
Exactly.
So I certainly wouldn't want any parent to not talk to their kids about butts and poo and penises and all of these very important things for fear that their kid might make jokes about it at school. I mean, that's what kids do. And yeah, you're probably going to get feedback from somebody at some point that your kid said something in, it wasn't appropriate in that situation. And that's when you talk about when and where it's okay to share these jokes with your friends. And maybe in church during the sermon is not the best time to, loudly giggle when your brother farts.
Yeah. Or at grandma's dinner table. It's location.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But Jen, I gotta just interrupt you here and circle back a little bit, because you said 2 words that I have no clue what they actually mean. And I'm sure our listeners are as curious.
Fecal transplant?
Yeah. What the heck?
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, we're going to do this quick in case those of you that don't care don't leave us. In my other life, I was a nurse, and now I write, and a lot of what I write is health content. And long story short, you may have heard about the gut microbiome, right? How we all have very different bacterial makeup in our guts, and that influences our health. So basically, they have found that there are ways to transfer the gut bacteria from people that have healthy microbiome to some people who are like really, really sick, have been dealing with issues for a long, long time. And yeah, they use poo to do that. They take the poo from the healthy person and they process it and
All right. Okay. I'm good.
Yep.
Good.
That's as far as we're going with that.
Wipe that out. Yep. Let's get back to pee and poop. And, another thing I want to just plug in here, because it relates to this question too, is kind of that idea of gross. And like the art teacher of, poo underneath a giraffe picture is not, actually, I thought you were going to say he drew a great big penis, but
that's what I thought she was going to say too. So I was really pleased when it was a pile of poo in an appropriate spot.
Exactly. And so my point is that we as the adults can take some of this with a grain of salt and let it go. And yes, they are going to be gross, and not to get upset when the teacher calls home and says,
right.
Yeah.
Right. I wish that the school had handled it in such a way where, this is a great opportunity to talk about, yes, giraffes poop and all animals do. And here's how or why maybe it wasn't a good idea to put this in this picture that we were going to hang up in the hallway. Like, talk about that part. But the fact is, he had some basic information about how bodies work. Talk about that. When I got the call from school, he was so upset. And at this point, he was going to school very close to home, like a block and a half away. I actually went to the school and, because he was just like so upset, he just couldn't. He was upset that he got in trouble. He didn't need me to yell at him or reprimand him at that point. Like, that had been handled. He just needed a hug, and he needed to know that I still thought he was okay. And that's pretty much all I did. Yeah,
and there's a basic level of shame and humiliation in that story.
Yes.
And this is a thread that we have talked about before. So.
And I want to give Stephanie some reassurance also. It changes. These guys, like the dads, and like me last night, they may always find the pee and poop jokes kind of funny, but your teenage boys are not going to be doing this to the same extent your 6-year-olds and your 8-year-olds are. Right. They do mature. It changes. So
it changes. So on that note, you have to tell the story that you told me before we hit record today. Because it relates to Amy Lang, and it all ties together.
The one about how my son's friends are giving him a hard time about his mom being a podcaster.
That one.
So I learned this week that one of the things that my 15-year-old's friends are doing, and by the way, Riley, if you are listening, hi, how are you? Thanks,
Riley.
They like to find me on social media because I'm one of the parents who is pretty active on social media, and I'm putting out there things that I do, and it's about boys, no less. So they found the podcast, and he plays Fortnite. We've talked about that and mentioned that on here before. It's a video game. They play connected over the internet. He's got his headphones on. And so they will blast an episode of the podcast in his ears to try and rattle him because it's his mom talking about boy stuff, and they just find that hilarious. And I was telling Janet before, I was trying to make my kid feel better, and I said, hey, at least I'm not the one, and I was referring to the episode with Amy, at least I'm not the one who's talking to other people about how to talk about sex. You could have it worse. I'm only interviewing the person who's talking to parents about how to talk about sex. And posted a really interesting video this week about masturbation.
Yes, saw it.
Yes, we'll include that in the link. If you've not seen it yet, it is a fantastic episode where she's really talking about how we need to talk to our boys about porn in the relationship to masturbation. And it was a link I'd not thought about before.
Yes, absolutely. Gotta love Amy. So we'll link to that podcast also. Shall we move on?
Let's take another question. I think we went way off track there, but hopefully it was helpful.
Yes, this is Janet and Jen Unplugged. And wow, we are unhinged today, I would say. So here's another developmental question. And that is, at what age is experimenting developmentally acceptable, and when is it a red flag? When not to ground them for life, and when to educate them and let them grow. And this could fit in many contexts, but the context from Heather is vaping, which is a thing.
Yeah, so if you don't know what vaping is, it's something that a lot of teenagers are doing and experimenting with, and it's sort of, as they think of it, in lieu of smoking cigarettes. It's where you use the vape juice in like this electronic pen-looking device and vape.
And it's marketed to kids. And I saw a video about this too. I'll try to get you the link and we'll include it in the show notes.
I thought about this question a lot. And some people may be surprised by my answer here, because if you've been listening for a while or following my blog, you know that I am a pretty laid back parent, right? Try things, see what happens. I don't set a lot of super strict boundaries because like they have to find limits for themselves. Vaping is one of those things where I'm not going to say it's acceptable. Mm-hmm. Is it unusual for a kid to experiment with it? Absolutely not. It happens. But if it was my kid, I wouldn't ground him for life. I don't think there's anything worth grounding for life, but I would let him know in no uncertain terms, this is not acceptable. Mm-hmm. Because remember I said a little bit ago, I'm a health writer also. The research has showed so far that this is not safer than cigarette smoking, maybe in fact just as damaging to the body. So we're talking about an activity that can damage a part of the body, the lungs, that you need your entire life. Like, to me, that's nothing to mess around with. Mm-hmm. So I would approach it from that standpoint, and talk about how and why it is completely unacceptable. And I do not support that. And we would have to think and discuss consequences as well.
Yeah. This is a tricky one too, because I can think about earlier years when cigarette smoking was the thing that you did in junior high and snuck off and smoked cigarettes. Vaping is odorless, so there's less chance of getting caught, I guess. But it's you can sit with a teen and yada, yada, yada about health effects. And you and I both know that they could care less because they're invincible and it's not going to happen to them and they're not going to get addicted because that doesn't happen to them or their friends. So there is a place where it is time to just, as you said, this is the limit. You may not go past this limit. And here are the consequences. And you can help them. You can have them help you determine the
Right.
consequences.
Right.
But there will be consequences. And if it means that you don't get to go hang out with your friends for a while, oh well.
Right. You know, I think the other thing that's important for parents to know, if they don't already, we may have listeners who are way ahead of me on this, but people can get like marijuana and use it in the vape pen so that what looks like, oh, I'm just vaping, it's no big deal, they may be using illegal substances too. So that's just another thing to think about. There's a lot of information out there about vaping already, but you know, for me, you don't ground them for life, but neither is it acceptable.
Yeah. Even though you might want to ground them for life, and you might threaten it, and that's okay too. But, and I think this goes into the bigger discussion too of pot, because I live in Oregon. Pot is totally legal here and it's widely available. There's a pot shop pretty much on every corner. And yeah, you have to be, I think, 21 to buy, but
that's worked out really well with alcohol, hasn't
it? Right.
No teens.
So it's the conversation way ahead of teenage years about, you know, your job as the parent is safety. And that starts out with, you know, a seatbelt and then a helmet and then all these choices that you have out there. And I still am your parent and we're still going to make safe choices. And yeah, you're going to want to experiment, but you get to experiment inside this container, not your choice, my choice.
And again, that caveat that you can say and do all the right things and your kid may still well make some bad choices. And then as a family, you wrestle through it.
Yeah.
You'll come out on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if your teen is really challenging you or is having issues with addictive substances, seek outside help. You do not have to do this all by yourself. And so find those wise individuals that have been working with teens for years and get some help.
That's great advice. So let's tackle another one of these questions, Janet. I really liked this one from Kate. When do you need to back the school and their approach regardless? And when should you challenge it? And I'm assuming that this question refers to a topic we've talked about a lot, which is that a lot of what happens at schools isn't necessarily boy-friendly.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I would like more information specifically about this from Kate, but I think that it is a place, and of course it's age dependent, but my mind went immediately to homework. Like, are we going to force you to do homework because the school says you have to do homework? You know, to really look at, and this is such an opportunity for those kinds of conversations of, all right, this is one person or one school's opinion or the teacher's opinion, and here's our family values, because I think everything can go back to the filter of family values. And then you lay it out on the table and you have the conversation about it age appropriately. I mean, if your boy's in first grade, of course, you're probably not going to do that. But especially middle school and high school, kids need to have these kinds of conversations where they can express their opinion. And then, you know, you bring in another opinion, and it's called conversation and discourse, which we're totally getting away from in our world. And we need to have experience with that as parents, as kids. Our kids need that experience.
You know, this is one that every parent wrestles with. I'll say every parent of boys. I've not been a girl parent, but I'm sure it comes up for parents of girls also. And you go back and forth. You kind of walk that line. Do I push back? Do I not push back? And for me, what I try and do is I don't want to actively undermine anybody at the school in front of my kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if the teacher has imposed a consequence, or if the administration has imposed a consequence, right? First of all, my first reaction is definitely not to blow up, or say something, or that teacher's stupid, or, oh my gosh, how could that be so dumb? I don't do that. First of all, I know my kids. This is true for all kids, but I'm only hearing their side of the story. So I reach out and I try and get the information from the school, because they may have more information that's important to this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I don't undermine. And then depending on what's going on, I kind of do this dance sometimes where I will try and work with the school, whether that's an individual teacher, as we've done on some issues like classroom behavior issues, or with the school as a whole, for instance, on like recess policy, when they get to go out, when they don't get to go out. I will try and work with the school to work towards changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I will let my sons know I'm having these conversations with the school, so that they know I have heard you and we're talking about this. And at the same time, this is what the rules or the circumstances are now. And so this is what you have to play by. And as you said, that's developmentally a really important thing, because rules are different in different places. Policies are different in different places. And that's something that our boys have to learn how to navigate as they grow.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So another topic that's come up a lot is lying. And Colleen asks for strategies for dealing with the sudden increase in lying in preteen boys. But this is not just a preteen boy thing. This is little boys, and like blatant, right in your face, no, I didn't do that. And you clearly know he did, kind of lying. What are your thoughts on that?
So a few years ago, I wrote an article about lying, and I think it might still be online. I'll look that up and put it in the show notes, people.
Awesome.
But the biggest takeaway from that one, because it was talking about like the development of lying. Little kids can't lie because they can't hold in their mind these two things. So in order to lie, you know what's true, but you also are creating this other reality. And so what these experts were telling me is that lying is actually a huge developmental leap, because it shows that your child has this ability to kind of hold and manipulate these different ideas at the same time.
Oh, yay.
Right. So actually the takeaway there was that, like, if your kid starts lying younger than other kids, they're probably actually highly intelligent. So parents, take that for what it's worth. That doesn't help when you are just trying to get the truth from your kiddo, right? And when you're frustrated and like, this is so stupid. Yes, this happens at all ages, but I have heard the same thing too, particularly in the tween years and those early teen years. There does seem to be a bit of an uptick. And so I want to look first at the developmental aspect of that. What's happening in that time? Kids are trying to separate themselves from their parents. They are realizing that they are separate beings. They want to do their own thing. And yet at the same time, they don't want to get in trouble. So lying is kind of the way that you do that. You do what you want, and then you tell your parents what you think that they want to hear, right?
Sure. We've all done it.
Yeah. Yes, we have, Mom. Yes, I did. Mom, I really did. So,
and Riley, if you're listening, we know this to be true.
Oh, yeah, Riley. Your parents.
Oh, poor Riley. He's going to get it. Let's send him a link to this episode, right?
Can't wait. And you know what the best part is? Riley is one of 5 boys in his family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe we should get Riley's mom on a podcast.
Oh, that would be fantastic. All right. So sudden increase in lying in preteen boys. How do you deal with it? First of all, with compassion, both for your son and for yourself. And I think a really good step is to do your best to minimize the amount of times that your son needs to lie to you. And what I mean by that is, So often kids lie because let's say they did something they know they weren't supposed to, right? And you ask them if they did it and they're already feeling terrible about it and they're afraid you're going to blow up. And based on past experience, let's face it, that might be really, really likely. So as a parent, one of the things you can do is to start having some open conversations with your kid. And if you have overreacted in the past, say, hey, I've overreacted. You know what? Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody screws up. I want you to be able to come to me when you have a problem and we'll figure out together how to make it better. So I think that's first step. How about you?
Well, I'm thinking about even younger boys and girls, and that is, and it's a little bit what you said about being put on the spot. Nobody wants to be put on the spot, and boys especially are sensitive to being embarrassed or shamed or humiliated, especially in front of their friends. And oftentimes they will say something because they think that's what you want to hear. And so it's like, I don't know what to say right now, but I'm just going to say this because I think that's what she wants me to say. And so it's kind of that place where we, as in our quick, ever so quick mom female brains, we're like, yeah, let's get, we got to get the answer here. I ask a question, I want an answer. And boys and men typically don't process that quickly. And so they'll just fill in the gap with something that could be wildly outrageous.
And it may happen just that instinctively. It wasn't necessarily a premeditated lie.
Right. Totally not premeditated, just blah. It just comes out. So recognize that, like understand that may be what's going on, that he's just simply like trying to fill in the blank there. That's cool.
I had a great thought. I just don't remember what it was.
About lying, about sitting and talking about it, or...
Oh, it's almost here. I lost it again. Shoot, Janet.
Dang.
Sorry.
No apologies. Okay, so we can start in with preteen boys. I'm thinking of like consequences and back around to that. Like, I'll ask you. So Jen, do you think that there should be consequences when your child is caught out in a lie?
I remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, cool.
Can we go back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take two.
I followed some of this conversation and I can't remember where I even saw it online anymore, if it was your Facebook group or my Facebook group or somewhere else. But another mom was sharing that one of the things that really was challenging and kind of triggered her own anger over this issue was when the kid would blatantly say, I don't know how that happened, or I don't recall, when like the evidence is right there. How can you tell me you don't recall or you don't know? Like, it's right there. And it made me think about the fact that, especially with our older boys, but perhaps with our younger ones in age appropriate ways too, let's face it, they are seeing lots and lots of examples of grown-ups, powerful grown-ups, saying, I don't recall, I don't remember. It's kind of endemic in our culture right now. So again, this is a good opportunity to talk to your kiddos about, this is what we believe in our family. We value honesty. Here is why, some lawyers, for instance, may recommend that their clients use these kinds of words, but we believe in integrity, in accepting responsibility for your actions. And that's why this is so important to me. And that's why it bothers me when you deny any knowledge of something that this, and this shows me that you probably have a pretty good idea of what happened here. So I think that's an important point to acknowledge.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And along with that is, what are you modeling in your own home?
Yeah, that's a challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Those little white lies, is that really a thing? Or, oh, it's just a fib? Or your kids are picking up on this all the time. So where do you draw the line in kind of whitewashing things or smoothing things over? Pay
when they get
attention.
to be tweens and teens, you can bet they will challenge you on those things.
Mm-hmm.
Guaranteed, because they're trying to find the line. They're trying to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But how to handle it? Consequences. Should there be consequences for those kinds of lies? What do you think?
I think it's a case by case basis. I really do. I think if it's a maybe an unusual kind of out of character event, then it's really you need to do some detective work around what was going on, what are his friends influencing him, and was he stressed about something? I think of this as like looking at what's underneath the lying behavior.
Yeah.
And what is he really trying to say? And helping him kind of sort through that. So what's like the mask is the lie. What's behind the mask that he is not able to articulate or is afraid to, or, peer pressure, so many other things going on in this instance. If it becomes a common thing that he's lying every day or something, then you better really take notice. But if it's an every now and then kind of thing, sometimes humor is enough to kind of pull him back from that brink of like, oh, and age appropriately, not for younger kids, but sarcasm. Tweens and teens can finally understand sarcasm and it isn't taken the wrong way.
So here's a lie I caught one of my teens in a couple years ago. This is, I won't name which one, but one of the boys asked if he could go sleep over at a friend's house. Sure, I know the friend, I know the family, absolutely you can sleep over at the friend's house. Okay, cool. The friend also has divorced parents. So the first question was, which parent's house are you going to be at? I'm going to be at dad's house. Okay, great. I know where that is. Again, comfortable with the situation. Cool. He was gone. I happened to be scrolling through Facebook later, and there was a picture of the friend's dad and his wife in Door County, Wisconsin. And we don't live in Door County. And so I called my son and I said, hey, is your friend's dad home? Yeah, he's here.
Oh.
Huh. Because I just saw this picture and it looks like, so then the friend gets on the phone and the friend is explaining to me that, that was an old picture. That was like last week. But, my dad is weird about things. He just doesn't want to put it up when he's gone because then people know he's gone. Like, the boys were caught on the spot and they were making it up as they went along. Like, they were just, ooh. It didn't sound quite right to me. And meanwhile, this is the advantage of knowing the other parents of kids that your kid's hanging out with. I had already texted the parents to say, hey, are you in Door County? And I didn't hear back right away because they were in Door County. They were having a good time.
They were having fun.
Later, they were up there, and these two children of divorced parents were playing two ends to the middle. The one kid told his mom, I'm staying at dad's house because we're going to do this golf thing tomorrow. And my kid said, and so there was all this lying that happened because they just wanted to hang out at the dad's house while nobody was home. That for me was, there's got to be a consequence. Like, this is not okay. You're not being honest with me about where you're going, and you were clearly caught in a blatant lie. So ultimately, kid got called back home, and he could not do the golf thing the next day with them. And there was, the parents on all sides talked, and then I talked to my kid later, like, this is a big deal because now I can't trust you.
Yeah.
You were old enough that when you told me you were going X, I had no reason to doubt you. I believed you. And now I know I can't trust that. So things got tight for a while and he had a lot more oversight. So
yeah, natural consequence. Absolutely.
yeah,
And safety is involved.
right,
So you need to know where your kids are and who they're with. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I think we probably have time for two more. What do you think?
Let's go for it.
Okay. Daniel has asked, for young boys, what's the best way to allow kids to be adventuresome, risky physically while maintaining a clear, safe boundary and being a responsible parent?
You go first on this one, Janet.
Okay, let me add it. This is interesting coming from a man, because this is usually the question that I get from moms, and I'll often say, go check in with dad. If you're feeling like, oh, should I let him climb that tree? Is it too high? Is the slide too high? Check in with dad, and dad will likely say, no, it's fine. Let him go for it. So fascinating that it comes from a dad. I like that. I think there is, I think it's important to let our kids be physically taking risks. And when they start young and it is within their boundaries, so in other words, he has to be able to climb the tree on his own without you giving him a boost. He is going to go at his developmentally appropriate limits. That is what you can pay attention to. But if you're there hovering, helping him every step of the way, he's not going to learn to trust his body. And that's when he's going to get in trouble physically. So for instance, my dear friend who has my sweet little 2.5, almost 3-year-old, he's a climber, and he climbed before he could walk. And mom let him because
Good for her.
Because, and sure, he would occasionally take a tumble, but he knows the limits of his body, and he's not going to go further than he can go. And he's climbing trees now. They have steps up in their big tall tree in the background, in the backyard, and he goes as far as he can go. And then he stops and he looks around, checks in on mom, and then he's ready to come down. That's as far as. Next year he'll go farther.
Yep.
So let them take small risks as they're growing, and recognize, of course, you're not going to let them walk out into a street, but keeping those boundaries, but stretching them. I'm going to guess whatever your boundaries are, you can let them stretch a little bit.
I have to say I struggled with this question because I think it's impossible, right? I mean, you can't really allow kids adventure and risk while maintaining a clear, safe boundary. First of all, that boundary it's moving all the time. It depends on the kid and the kid's age and your values and where you live. That boundary is changing. I can't tell you, here's the boundary. The closest I can come is, as parents, we can absolutely insist on some must-dos. So for instance, if you are riding in a vehicle, you wear your seatbelt, period. Vehicle doesn't move until you have your seatbelt on. If you are going for your bike ride, you have your helmet on, period. Or you're not riding your bike. If you are skateboarding, same thing. So as if you are going to be down by the river, you need to have your life jacket on. For me, those are the kinds of clear, safe boundaries that, first of all, they help me relax as a parent, right? Like if I know that my kid's brains aren't going to be splattered all over if he hits his head, I can relax a little bit more when he decides to launch his bike off the ramp he just built. A little bit more.
A little bit.
If my kid is fishing independently down by the river, and he's got a life jacket on, I take a little bit of comfort in that.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of safety things where I think we can really enforce something while giving our kids room and, frankly, the tools to explore and adventure.
Yeah. How about Chrissy's question?
Oh, this is a great one.
This could be a whole podcast all on its own.
and maybe it will be. Maybe we will go further with this one. But Chrissy is a mom of a little boy, and she asked, how do you talk about the needs of boys and the help they need without sounding dismissive of girls or anti-feminist? And then she uses the example that, as a mom of a boy, she's not really sure about this decision for the Boy Scouts to become gender neutral and invite girls. And she says, I think boys benefit from boys only time, but how do I make this point without sounding sexist or anti-progressive? I have thought about this question a lot since she sent it in.
Well, this certainly hits the nail on the head for me because my dad was an executive with the Boy Scouts of America.
I did not realize
for
that.
his entire professional life.
Okay.
And to think that girls, I mean, he's going to be 92 this year, and I'm kind of appalled that he's seeing the evolution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with it, of the Boy Scouts to allow girls in. And now the latest thing is, now we're not going to call it the Boy Scouts of America. We're calling it the Scouts of America. This gets my hackles up because I think that we have taken away a lot of things from our boys, and our boys need some sacred space just like our girls do. Mm-hmm. And Boy Scouts was one of those places where it was clear, this is for boys, this is how we do it. And we're in this kind of politically correct time of, gender neutral and everybody can do everything. And it is absolutely true. And yet boys need their own thing. And
they need spaces where they can make those poop jokes, for instance.
Absolutely. And not have to be concerned about the squealing reaction of the girls. This reminds me of I was in a public school, 5th grade class, and I had given this whole professional development talk about gender and boys and girls and learning differently. And so the teacher decided to rearrange her classroom and have the boys all together, like push all the boy desks together and push all the girls' desks together. And I came back a couple weeks later and I, very quietly went over to the boys. It's like, hey, how do you like this? Being, it's great. It's great. We love it. And we can talk about the same things. And then I went over to the girls and I said, how do you like this? Oh, we love it. We don't have to worry about what the boys are going to say when we ask a question. So it is so important that we do separate the genders. And then I know the gender fluidity question is going to come up. But in general, broad generalization, we absolutely have to have a sacred place for boys to be boys and a place for girls to be girls. And yes, there's places where absolutely they can do stuff together, but on the sports field, in clubs, whatever, give them an opportunity to be boys only, girls only. And I don't think that we are doing a disservice to one or the other if we amplify and focus on one or the other.
So here's where I think that moms of boys and female teachers of boys can be such powerful voices, right? Because, Chrissy's question is, how do you talk about the needs of boys without sounding, dismissive of girls' concerns or anti-feminist? As a woman, I am well aware of the history and continuing sexism in this country. So are you. So is every single woman alive in this country, right? Mm-hmm. So I am definitely sympathetic. It's not that I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I do. I know exactly what it's like. But as a mom of boys, I'm very cognizant of their issues too. And so I think there can be a lot of power when women who are familiar with the challenges that women and girls still face and who know that there's still progress to be made on those fronts, talks about those things and also says, but hey, our guys need some things too. Mm-hmm. If men say the same thing, their message, even if it's exactly the same, is more likely to be interpreted as misogyny than if it comes from a woman.
Yeah.
And so I think our voices are so important, and it's not easy, and you will get some pushback, but we have to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of, I was at a talk and I gave the talk in the morning about boys, and then in the afternoon was a college professor also talking about boys and the challenges, and he had all the data points and all of that. And afterwards we were kind of debriefing the day, and we both kind of looked at each other like, wow, you can say some things that I can't say. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, and you can say some things that I, as a man and an academic, can't say. And so we need all voices in this conversation, and advocacy is just so important. And yes, for our girls, but I'm going to say, a little bit more for our boys right now. Yeah. Our boys need us to speak up.
We had some great questions today from our listeners. Listeners, I hope that we answered your questions. If you feel like we did too much talking around and didn't get to the meat of it, leave us a comment and we will do our best to circle back with some resources and more information for you. And I think that we should do this as a regular thing, Janet.
I think so too. This was fun.
All right. So if you have some questions that came to mind while listening, pop on over to the website on-boys-podcast.com, leave us a comment, and we'll start our list of questions for next time.
Great. Awesome. Great to talk to you as always, Jen.
You too.